Welcome to Season 4 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sara F. Hathaway. Blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sara F. Hathaway.
Hi, and welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. This is episode number 130, Season 4, Episode 6. So I'm happy to have you back with me today. It's been an exciting new year. I'm just looking forward to a whole bunch of things, but I'm just getting over being sick. And one of the things that I've been using is the eucalyptus breathing treatment. It's been working really, really well to break you up. So I got to figure out how to grow eucalyptus trees, I guess, because in an SHTF situation, I'm not going to really be able to grab some eucalyptus oil, but I would really love to, I know I can grow them in my area, so I'm thinking about growing some of those trees because, you just boil the water, put a little bit of oil into the water, and put a towel over your head and breathe that. Oh, the steam feels wonderful, and it just melts everything out of your head. So definitely a great avenue to use if you're feeling sick and you just need something to really help break your head up and help you feel better. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm still waiting on the audiobook to be, okayed by Amazon. So everything is good now as far as like the technicalities of the audio. I really had some hiccups there. My microphone, my new one, is actually too good. So it picked up some pops and clicks along the way that I really had to go in and fix up. And, they have special requirements that you have to meet. So finally jumped through all those hoops. So we're ready to go. I'll let you know as soon as I have those codes available. Still setting up for the Self-Reliance Expo. It's going to be a great time. This is happening in March on the 23rd and 24th in Mesquite, Texas. Going down there, I'm going to be mediating a panel of survival experts down there. I know James Hart from our show is on there. Blake Alma, who's been on my show, is going to be on that panel. So I'm so excited to go down and meet so many of these people that I just get to meet on the internet through interviews and things like that. So very excited to have that opportunity. Can't wait to head down there. So last week on the Changing Earth podcast in Battle for the South, Vince and Erika made it through the town, the port town that they arrived in. So it was not an easy task, but they made it through the town. And this week we're going to catch back up with Master Sergeant Bennet, see what he's up to. And he is utilizing military intelligence to try and track down Vince and Erika, of course. So here to talk to us today about the aspects of military intelligence is Samuel Culper. Happy to have him back on the show. He was a great guy to interview. We had a lot of fun together. And of course, over at forwardobserver.com, if you use the coupon code Sara, you're going to get a 10% discount on all of his great programs that he has over there. So I highly recommend you head on over there and check it out. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into Chapter 6 of Battle for the South. Chapter 6. The Master Sergeant paced furiously behind a desk in a small office. He was tired of waiting for answers. "Nothing yet?" he snapped at Corporal Smith. "No, sir. None of the units turned up anything," the corporal answered. "Corporal, they have to have landed on this coastline." "What did our ship report?" Bennet pried. "They had 2 shipping container ships come through, 1 personal yacht, and a small fishing boat," Smith answered. "The fishing boat. How many people were on it?" Bennet wondered. "Just 1, sir. They had a boarding team clear the ship, sir," Smith replied. "It had to be that boat," the Master Sergeant pondered, rubbing his chin. "Where did it make landfall, Corporal?" Corporal Smith flipped through a logbook. "Looks like Lufkin Port, Texas, sir." "It's been too long now. They must have made it through the town somehow." Bennet pondered. "Damn it, Erika. What are you doing?" he worried to himself. He knew if the federal forces found her and her husband, there would be nothing he or anyone could do to save them. "We need to keep this real quiet, Corporal. We'll make believe like the sweep turned up our couple, so the coastline relaxes the alert. Sergeant Jensen will go towards Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and intercept Sean and Star. Make sure he stays out of sight. Have him follow her just in case Vince and Erika attempt to contact her again. We'll be departing at 0800. Tell Corporal Shaver." Yes, sir, Smith answered, leaving Bennet alone in the room. He picked up the phone on the desk and told the operator to put him through to Major Burgess at the Millilax base. Do you want me to come down there, Master Sergeant? Major Burgess questioned. Major Cole Burgess had pursued Erika and her family in the past and knew what a challenge it could be. No, sir. I don't want anyone to be suspicious. I'm still hoping to bring them home without incident, Bennet explained. Master Sergeant Bennet, I know as much as you how essential Erika is, but we still have rules to follow. They are under a direct violation right now. Get them home, the major puffed, reminding Bennet of his responsibilities. Yes, sir, Bennet hesitated. Sir? Yes, the major wondered. Can you send me a trustworthy canine unit and Corporal McClintock? Bennet requested. I'll send them your way. Where are you headed next? Burgess queried. I'm headed to Old Austin. Send them there, Bennet replied. Will do. And Patrick? Major Burgess said affectionately. He hardly ever used his friend's first name, and Bennet picked up on it immediately. What's that, Cole? Master Sergeant Bennet replied in the same manner. Take care, buddy. Old Austin can be a very dicey place for mercs, Cole warned. I know they are headed to the free zone. I'll cover my 6, Bennet responded. They finished their conversation and Bennet slowly placed the phone back on the receiver. He stared at it for a moment, reflecting on his friend's words. On a mission, he charged out of the door to meet with Corporal Smith and Corporal Shaver. It was a short walk through the base to the garage. Bennet signed for a Jeep and loaded it with extra fuel. His mind was laser focused. He needed to find Erika and Vince and get back to the northern region. Major Burgess must have already talked with General McClintock to be securing resources as quickly as he was, Bennet pondered. Old Austin was on the edge of country that had retained the law of the former United States of America with a Texas twist. The right to do so was paid for constantly with oil and chemicals pumped out of plants that had been saved from destruction. Bennet would have to make sure his team was ready for it. Corporal Shaver, go acquisition 2 weeks' worth of supplies, Bennet barked, lost in thought. Corporal Smith, weapons detail. Make sure we are locked and loaded. Yes, sir, the men replied, heading off to accomplish their tasks. She may be riding with the resistance, but she's after her mother, Bennet thought. He headed back to the office and dialed the operator. Connect me to the head of the Dallas textile operations, he commanded, waiting for the call to be connected. In a matter of moments, there was a man's voice on the other end. You have a woman working in one of your factories, Nancy Fisher. Where is she working and residing? Bennet questioned. We had a woman named Nancy Fisher working for us, sir. One of my best managers, too, the man replied. What do you mean had? What happened to her? He questioned, panicking a little. There's no way they got to her already, he worried. Matthew Tweed came and took her himself. He said the federal governing board had ordered her returned to the Las Vegas refugee camp. I didn't argue because he was in a horrible mood after what happened, the man clarified. Bennet sighed with relief and asked, What happened? You haven't heard, sir? Matthew Tweed was demoted by the federal governing board a month ago. They blamed the disorderly conduct that followed the Moore trial on him, the man informed him. Thanks for your help, Bennet responded. Erika is going to be pissed when she finds this out, he thought, chuckling to himself. The door creaked open and Corporal Smith entered. Sir, we are ready for weapon and supply inspection, sir, the corporal said flatly. Master Sergeant Bennet carefully checked over the supplies and confirmed they were sufficient. He watched, lost in thought, as the corporals loaded them into a Jeep. Leaving the base at Shreveport, Louisiana, they aimed towards Old Austin. Secretly, Bennet loved to be heading this direction. He was returning to his native state of Texas. Maybe if things had been different, he would have returned to his parents' ranch there. But they hadn't talked in years. In the still of quiet nights, he had wondered what had happened to them, and if they were still alive. Their ranch had been in southern Texas, where the militias had mobilized after the Great Quake and established the People's Republic of Texas, where freedom still reigned. Federal and mercenary soldiers alike had not been welcomed back. The people of Texas saw them as traitors for supporting this new socialized system. Sir, Corporal Smith broke his train of thought. Yes, Corporal, Bennet replied. His eyes were glued to the road. You know we're headed into hostile territory, right? The corporal questioned. Hostile for some, boy. This was my home once, he responded. In these uniforms, with this Jeep, it's hostile for us, sir, the corporal said nervously. You're not scared, are you, Smith? The master sergeant glared at him for a moment. No, sir, it's just... The corporal was unsure how to respond. It's good to be aware of threats, boy. Check out the back, the master sergeant said, pointing to the back seat. Civvies for all. I may be good, but I'm not stupid. Corporal Smith exhaled and relaxed a little. We'll dress in civvies and say we stole the Jeep. I'm not going to enter the freedom zone, but it should keep us under the radar and alive in Austin, Master Sergeant Bennet explained. Bennet and his crew head into dangerous territory to complete their mission and gather critical information. And here to talk to us today about how military intelligence is handled in the real world is Samuel J. Culper. Samuel Culper is a former military intelligence NCO and contract intelligence analyst. He now runs Forward Observer, a threat intelligence services company based in Texas. If you want to get a hold of Samuel and check out all his really interesting programs, you can reach him at forwardobserver.com. That's forwardobserver.com. You'll not be disappointed in the news that you receive from Samuel. Very, non-biased and just kind of telling you what it is, telling you the nitty-gritties behind the smoke and mirrors that they give us on regular media. Let's go ahead and welcome Samuel to the show. Today, I am honored to have Samuel Culper back on the show. Thank you, Samuel, so much for joining me today. I really appreciate having you back.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Sarah, for having me back on again. I really appreciate it.
So I know this topic is sitting right in your wheelhouse. You are the intelligence operations man. And in this chapter, Master Sergeant Bennet is gathering his information to go track these fugitives. So I know it's right in your wheelhouse. So let's just get right into the meat and potatoes. What are the steps to gaining appropriate military intelligence? Where do we start?
Well, the long answer, how much time do we have? I mean, this is like a day course, at least. But I always go back to the intelligence cycle, right? It's a 5-step process, and I'll just go around the circle just briefly. But the first phase is intelligence requirements and direction. Phase 2 is collection. I'll just talk through this, right? So phase 1, we have to identify our intelligence requirements, and that is we identify our intelligence gaps. So for Master Sergeant Bennet, he would be asking himself, okay, what does this guy look like? Where does he live? Where might he be? Who are his associates? What kind of vehicle or what method of transportation does he have? What kind of equipment? What kind of weapons? So on and so forth. All these questions that he might need to know in order to accomplish his mission. And so that's the first step, right, is really identifying what we do know and what we don't know. And
Right.
then of what we don't know, we task that out for collection, or we try to go collect that somewhere. Once that information is collected, we move to phase 3, which is analysis and processing. We have all this raw data back, and we have to sift through it, sort out the bad, good, and the ugly, and figure out what we think is true and what we think is untrue, discard the bad stuff, then compile it, and then we move to phase 4, which is production. So we produce this finished intelligence, right? It's not just information anymore. It's actually an intelligence product. And then phase 5, dissemination. So for us as a prepper groups, it may be, something along the lines of those 5 phases. At least that's what I recommend. And so that is the process, at least formally in the military and in government, how intelligence is created.
So on the intelligence, on the number 1, you're just basically sitting down and brainstorming. Like, these are the things we absolutely know, and these are the things we don't.
Yes,
right?
correct.
And then mission out to go collect, and then we're going to figure out what do we believe, what don't we believe. Then you produce a report, give it out to all the members. So
Correct.
what areas are analyzed to provide the information? What specific areas are you really, digging into?
Well, are you talking about geographic areas or topical areas?
So I'm just talking about what what kind of specifics, what's your main specifics that you're looking at? So obviously it's going to be geographical location, context that they have, what kind of areas are you really digging into?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Well, there's 6 layers. I mean, if we're going to get right down to it, we live in a potential battle space, right? I mean, we have an area of operations. That's our home or our community, the area where we're going to operate, the area we're going to protect, and so there are 6 elements of that area. There's 6 elements of the battle space. We start with physical terrain. And so those are, houses and sheds, construction, fences, even roadways and transportation that are in our neighborhood. And so we really need to understand where all those things exist, and not just that they exist, but how we can use them to our advantage and how our adversary can use them to their advantage. Favorable or defensible terrain is what allows small organizations to beat large organizations. I hate to say it, but what have we really accomplished in Afghanistan in the decade and a half or more that we've been there? And the answer is not much. And there's lots of reasons why. But one reason why is because the terrain is favorable to the defender and the Taliban, and not just physical terrain, but also geographical terrain, because they have hideouts. They essentially have support zones in Pakistan where they can go and hang out and largely evade U.S. targeting. And so that's an example of understanding the physical terrain around us. We move on to human terrain, right? Every member of our community is an intelligence sensor. They're hearing and seeing things all the time. And so really understanding them is such an important part of our security.
Right. That's where I feel we really lack, and here in the United States, we don't really get the understanding of the human terrain over in the areas that we're fighting in. We don't understand what these people are living through, what their beliefs are, what they're thinking, so we can't really relate very well. I don't know if that's just a personal opinion, but it seems hard to place yourself in their footsteps. Why would you want to be fighting all the time? What's the point? So I think they really don't inform us of, the human terrain over there. Why? What is the thinking? What are they doing? Why would they be doing that?
Mm-hmm. Because, well, that is a personal opinion, but I have to agree with you. You're spot on, right on the money. The reason why soldiers don't understand the human terrain is because we are war fighters. We're not nation builders. We're not the State Department. We're not humanitarians. We're not there to understand the people. But that's the kind of war that we're expected to fight. And really the DoD just the Department of Defense did a very poor job of preparing soldiers to go and fight this kind of war. And, I'll give you a real world example. In Iraq, we decided to partner with one sub-tribe in Anbar province. Mm-hmm. And that sub-tribe were mortal enemies of a separate tribe. And so the other tribe, we didn't have anything against the other tribe, but they looked at that and said, the Americans, they're working with our mortal enemies, and we've been fighting each other for hundreds of years, or maybe in Afghanistan for thousands of years as clans and tribes and sub-tribes. And so since the United States are working with our mortal enemy tribe, then they must be planning to attack us. Well, and now you've just created an unnecessary enemy because you didn't understand the human terrain. You didn't understand the second and third order consequences of this new project that you've undertaken. And so that's one reason why this just lack of understanding what the average 7-year-old understands, the average 50-year-old lieutenant colonel does not understand
right.
in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's what leaves me confused about the whole thing. It's can't we find, I want to hear the stories of the people over there. There was a great book called The Rape of Kuwait, and it really takes you in. He did interviews with people that were coming out of Kuwait as Iraq was attacking it, and got their personal opinions and feelings and what was happening in their lives. It was so eye-opening and made you go, you know what? They're people too, just trying to protect their families, and this is what their culture has taught them as they've grown up. It gives you that understanding,
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So what's number 3?
Yeah, number 3 is critical infrastructure. What keeps our world spinning? We have to understand where these things are, and not just for the sake of it being up, but we might need to acquire some things if things do get really bad, and knowing where that is very important. And not only that, but also knowing what are potential targets, because critical infrastructure. I always ask this question.
Yeah.
In a class or a speech or whatever. Raise your hand if you think Walmart or Target is critical infrastructure. And the answer is that it is, because it is critical to many members of the community. And so just understanding, where those are and really how they affect us. It's not just so much that they're there, but how let's say I live half a mile from a Walmart. Well, am I more likely or less likely to encounter looters or, people who are transitory through the area? And so that's one way that is going to affect me, or is highly likely to affect me. And so just being able to write that down on a sheet of paper and think through that is going to pay me very great dividends if something bad ever does happen. And then just briefly, we have politics and governance. We have the economy, economic and financial layer, and then the threat environment. And those are the 6.
What's the threat environment?
I'm sorry, but the threat environment is kind of separate of the operating environment. Sorry, but the 6th one would be military, law enforcement, and security. Sorry about that. And so, military, law enforcement, and security. Knowing, how many officers there are, what types of events they're prepared for. For instance, the county I used to live had essentially a SWAT team or a tactical response team that was 8 members, and I think they got like 8 hours of training a month. So in other words, not like super high speed. I mean, some of them may have been high speed, but they're going to be calling for state or potentially federal help in that area if something really big were to go down. And so that helps me have a reasonable expectation of, this event is happening. Okay, well, this now is early warning. I can reasonably expect state or federal forces to be in the area as a result of this.
Right. Yeah, and I even thought, knowing what kind of ammunition and stuff your local police force and like your local National Guard and things like that are using, if you bought a weapon that's using the same ammunition, at least you could, join forces with them eventually, kind of thing, if it came down to that, right? And you have a weapon that can fire the ammunition that they have stocked. So it's a good thing to know what are they using.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you gather all this data now. So there's got to be levels of how much you believe this information, right? So can we talk through that a little bit, like the levels of intelligence?
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is essentially source grades. And, that's more often or more regular in human intelligence. And so, talking to people, recruiting sources, eliciting information from people in the community who might know something that we need to know. And so over a period of time, let's say that Joe Bob is my intelligence source because he's the, janitor in some warehouse or some building or, whatever. In other words, he has access to information that I don't have access to. That's why I need to run him as a source. And so over the course of, 2 or 3 months, he's reporting back to me what's happening in the area. Well, I can go back and try to confirm, it's single source reporting. It's vulnerable because it's one person telling me something. I have no way of confirming or denying that information. But what I do want to try to do is confirm or deny that through other sources of information. And so if 9 of the 10 reports he's given me in the past 2 months have been spot on the money, well, now he has a reliable reporting history. And I say, well, Joe Bob said this. He's been a pretty good reporter so far. I have more reason to believe what he's telling me now.
That makes sense.
And so, I mean, if you want to go through and grade sources, like A, B, C, or whatever, I think that would be fine. That there's actually in is it 34- FM 34-52, I think, has a whole breakdown of all that stuff in there.
Yeah, because even we deal with a lot of information on the internet, right? I mean, so you've got to know how credible is that source that you're getting that information from. It's a huge problem right now, just trying to filter through all the different information that you're fed. And when we can't even trust our media or government sources, then that makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, it does. I mean, just the sheer bad reporting that the mainstream media has been able to get away with. I mean, it's ridiculous. They print something, it's circulated, it's seen by millions of people. A couple days or a couple weeks later, they print a retraction on the
Right.
back of the front page. Nobody sees it.
And nobody sees that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's like you can't do that. I mean, it's like a witch hunt nowadays.
Yeah, it is. And that is the nature of the nature of reporting these days, of websites and other media outlets that get their money from advertising, because they have to be bombastic and they have to report this salacious stuff. And if it's not true, they can just say, oh, whoops, we tried our best and we missed the mark this time,
Yeah,
just
sorry.
like all the other last times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So just beating each other to the punch. ABC and NBC just trying to put something out there just to be the first folks to do that. That's very unfortunate, and they've really lost their way.
I have to agree. And now it seems like they're cannibalizing themselves as well. So
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Right? I know. I can't say that I disagree. So if you're a commander, you're in charge of any kind of security group, whether that be, your MAG group or, anything like that. How do you know what course of action to take when you have conflicting information?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that we're likely to encounter.
Right.
Especially when we're dealing with, for most groups, probably going to be very limited information coming in, just because, it's hard to blame them. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know that they need to be gathering intelligence, or at least not formally, right? They have questions. They're trying to find answers. That's intelligence gathering, essentially. But they really need like a formal process, because that's the best way this stuff works. But yeah, conflicting information, ultimately it comes back to the commander, and the commander says, well, ultimately I rely on intelligence, which really just underscores the need for intelligence. There are a few ways that we can look at these things. Of course, we always want to try to confirm or deny information. We can look at, I call it the fact. It's the fact filter. F, is it feasible? Right? We look at these two different conflicting reports and we try to deconflict them. Mm-hmm. Is it feasible? Is it appropriate, or is it apt? Right? I mean, is this something that should be happening now? Or go back to feasible. Could it be true? FAC. C is
How
consistent.
Far out there is it? Yep.
Yeah. Is it consistent with things that have happened in the past? And then T, is it timely? Like, do we expect this to be happening now? And, there's any number of ways that you can do that. And I would just say, in general, taking a cumulative approach and breaking it down and really asking questions like, why do we believe one over the other? And the thing is, it's one of those conundrums, which person do you shoot first? Which way do you run? And there may not be a right answer. But ultimately, the better we know the situation, the better handle we have on what's going on at that moment, the better we are going to be able to make an analyst judgment and say, based on what I know, I believe this to be true, or more likely, sorry, not to be true, but to be more likely than this other report.
The other scenario. Just off topic, well, not off topic, but, they say that there was reports of the 9/11 attack before it even happened. So was that, that type of situation where they were like, how feasible is that for them to actually attack those buildings? And, is it consistent? Because nobody ever really did that before. And so, how immediate's the threat? Is that why they kind of dismissed it? I mean, do you know?
I don't know. To be honest with you, that's a rabbit hole I've never really gone down, but let's just, take this one step at a time. Is it feasible that part of 9/11 could have been something that we weren't told? Absolutely. Would it be appropriate? It's questionable, but based on what we know now, it certainly was the justification for the Bush attempt to try to remake the Middle. And I say Bush, but really it's a cabal of individuals who attempted to remake the Middle East, and what a fabulous job they've done so far.
Yeah.
Is it consistent? Yeah, the U.S. government has caused false flags, or at least kind of used false flags in the past. just like we got into Vietnam. And is it timely? Well, yeah. I mean, what, a year? Not even a year into the Bush administration. So he's got 3 full years to do whatever he wants, like invade Iraq or wherever. But and 40 other countries that we're now involved in. So I mean, I don't know. I can't say one way or the other. But to me, it's just, I mean, it's important to a lot of people. It's just not relevant to me. You know what's relevant to me? Things that are going on in my community.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what like I said before in our first interview, that's what I love about Forward Observer. When I first found it, I was like, wow, this is awesome. It's telling me about what's happening like right around, and nobody else really does that. Not on that level. You hear about the weather and the who shot who in Stockton, I mean, really, that doesn't affect me in my area, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's a game of proximity.
Yep. So what if, so you're mid-operation and your information that you took for granted that you knew was true, turns out to be wrong?
Yeah. Well, here, this is a real world example. There was a fruit vendor in Baghdad, and there are two competing fruit vendors, but these American soldiers were working with this one fruit vendor, and he said, "Yeah, I know this guy who's in Al Qaeda. He's a big guy in Al Qaeda, and he runs the fruit cart down the street, right? His competitor." And so what did U.S. forces do? Well, they go and arrest that guy, the competing fruit vendor, and now the guy who told on him has the street all to himself. And he has all the business for a few days while this other guy's being interrogated. And it was a very embarrassing event for those guys because they just made an enemy for life. And not only that, but they also pissed off the family of the individual who, by the way, his only form of income is selling fruit. So not exactly a prestigious career there in Baghdad. And right. and now you've just literally taken food out of the mouths of his children. And so it's something like that. It's like, well, stop digging, first of all. Try to assess the impact. What are the second and third order consequences of what we've done, or what are potential courses of action that could happen next as a result? That's really more, I'm speaking to the intelligence side of this question. What you do when you're on the X and you're in the wrong spot, that's an operations question. I really can't speak to that. I'm not an ops guy. But from an intelligence perspective, I know the commander is going to come back and start peppering me with questions about, well, what's the fallout? And what are these people saying? What are they thinking? What's likely to happen? Or what could happen next? And that's really where intelligence would play a role in this question. So that's the best advice I can provide for that.
So that's basically like, how do we repair the damage real quick? And what do we expect to happen from this whoopsie that we made, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, if you can repair the damage, yeah.
So how, you're gathering all this intelligence. How is one side's intelligence kept, hidden from the opposing side when we live in this information age? Like, is that a huge challenge nowadays?
Oh, yeah, it certainly is. Well, there's this guy online. He goes by the name The Grug. It's GRUGQ. I don't know why the Q's on there. But he's on Twitter, and he talks about operation security for hackers, right? These people really in high-stakes environments. They get caught there looking at a life sentence. And so one of the great quotes that he said as an information security guy, he said, the best way to keep a secret is to deny that one exists in the first place. And so we're talking about access. And so if you do have sensitive information, especially like source information, we have to keep that compartmentalized, right? So here's a great example. There's this thing called a canary trap. Do you remember a couple of years ago when Quentin Tarantino, the filmmaker and director, was getting ready to announce that he was going to start work on this Western film called The Hateful Eight?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I hated the movie, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was kind of like
weird.
meandering, and it's an interesting film. But at any rate, and he gave out several copies of the script to producers and the actors to, see if they'd be interested in it. And then one of those scripts leaked. And he was very angry that the script leaked online. It was posted on some like Gawker or somewhere. Uh-huh. And he said, oh, the project's off. I'm not going to do it anymore. Well, the problem is he didn't control the access, right? You give it to one person, who knows who sees it?
Right.
And so the canary trap here is if he gives out 6 copies of the script, he makes every copy slightly different. Page numbers, titles, words misspelled, whatever, and keep that in a log. So if number 3 were to be leaked, well, let's see who got the script number 3, and goes back and he exactly knows who exactly leaked it. And so that's kind of an counterintelligence trick. And so there are things that we can do to track leaks. But the first thing really is understand your adversary, understand your adversary's capabilities. If you're trying to maintain your privacy from NSA, well, don't go online and don't carry your cell phone in your pocket. And don't use a lot of this technology, like the Internet of Things technology, because it is, well, I can't say for a fact that it's spying on you, but we know for a fact that people would like for it to be spying on you if it's not already.
For sure. Yep.
Right. And so first of all, it's identify your adversary or who you're trying to keep this information from. Think like the wolf and say, what are their capabilities? How do they gather information? And then once we do that, say, well, where am I vulnerable, right? It's this OPSEC planning process that we can use. And this is loosely what it is. And then understand or think through how are they going to target me, or how are they going to target my computer? Well, if they have any kind of SIGINT or cyber capabilities, well, the best thing to do is to keep that information on a standalone computer that's not connected to the internet and that is physically unable to connect to the internet. And so there you go. You're not on their chessboard. If you're on their chessboard, they can beat you. If you're on a separate chessboard, and you keep that chessboard a secret, then they may never even know that you're playing on that chessboard. So, I mean, there's a lot of technical things like encryption and two-factor authentication and code words and all these different things. But in general, understand who's coming against you, figure out how they're going to come against you, and then take that surface area where you can be attacked and make it smaller or remove it altogether.
Right. Eliminate that threat from yourself.
Eliminate the vectors that they're going to use to attack you.
So what are some of the common threats that military intelligence operations are facing today? What kind of issues are they dealing with right now?
Well, identities is a big one, right? Yeah. I mean, You've got a top secret clearance. You've done a bunch of hinky stuff that no one knows about, except for maybe foreign governments know about it. And I'll tell you exactly what's going on because all this stuff's open source. But look, you remember, several years ago, there was that really big data breach or leak that happened at the Office of Personnel Management. They leaked the SF-86 forms of, I want to say something like 20 million Americans who had security clearances.
Right.
We'll be suffering from that for decades. Because that has financial information, it has, familial information, your, history, all sorts of, it's a biographical sheet, biographical form that's like something like 11 pages long that they use to initiate and complete your background check. And so now the Chinese have that information. Well, it gets a little bit worse, right? So, now they can steal personal information from, let's say, flight records, maybe into Beijing or into Singapore or Japan or Uzbekistan or wherever, and say, oh, this is interesting. This individual who has a top secret clearance, or at least was put in for a top secret clearance, is flying into Uzbekistan. Or they can go several steps further than that and really, really start to identify, people who are doing clandestine activities, and now with facial recognition and Facebook, and the face is out there, and you can alter your name. You can have a million different names, but guess what? You've got basically 10 fingerprints. You got basically 2 irises, and you have essentially one face, even though it can be just somewhat disguised.
Yeah.
But that's a real problem, and that's one thing that the intelligence community is dealing with right now, especially with biometrics. Right? You go into to Kyrgyzstan, right? And let's just say I don't know if they take your biometrics there, but let's say they do, right? Let's say they take your fingerprints,
Right.
and well, guess what? If you're pretty much or you could be screwed if Kyrgyzstan shares the biometric information with Uzbekistan as some kind of security sharing agreement, and you try to travel to Uzbekistan under a different passport or a different name and the same 10 fingerprints, and you don't know those two countries are sharing biometric information, then you have just stepped one step too far in Uzbekistan. And so, those are the kinds of things that are happening right now as surveillance technology and data, especially big data, is becoming used by foreign governments and our own governments too.
So it's not just it's not just the criminals that can't do this anymore. It's our security people, our top clearance people who need to go in and stay under the radar as well, and they can't now because of the trackability, basically.
Well, I mean, there are some caveats. They still can, but it's with these biometric controls and digitized visa programs now, it's not like you can just walk into the country and say, oh, I forgot my papers, I don't have my visa.
Right.
If you were to be caught, it's very difficult to parachute into a country or to jump across the border and or get dropped off at the border and walk your way in somewhere.
Right, and then just have a great story and a great line and be able to just pull that off. Yeah, with all the tech.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So how, you got some advice for how we can apply all this great information you just gave us to our own personal groups in an SHTF situation?
Yeah, the best piece of advice I can give you is understand your adversary's capabilities. If they have signals intelligence capabilities, well, guess what? We've got to stop using our cell phone. Because if it's trackable, they can track it. If it emits a signal, it can be tracked. If they don't have signals intelligence, then maybe that's not a problem. I will tell you this, a huge pet peeve of mine, and again, this kind of goes back to what are the chances and people not knowing what they don't know. But these Baofeng radios, right? They're like the darling sweetheart radios because they're cheap and they can be used in a pinch, and that's fine. If that's the only thing you have to communicate, that's fine. But with an $80 receiver, I can sniff out those frequencies and I can listen in real time to a conversation that you're having. That's why some people call this radio a Bubba Finder, because and so it's not difficult. You can do it with commercial off-the-shelf technology and essentially have your own signals intelligence shop running. And
right.
I mean, it's not like any of my students would be. That's kind of tongue-in-cheek because hopefully they will. But yeah, hopefully people on our side are running their own intelligence gathering, and just understand that goes both ways. If we can do it to them, then they can do it to us.
Yeah. So know who's out there who would possibly want to wish your group harm, and then know what their capabilities are. Don't fall ploy to it. It's gonna be tough. That would be a really tough one to know, because how do you figure it out? I mean, when you're in that kind of situation, do you have would you imagine sending over an infiltrator, or maybe send someone to trade with them and try and gather that way?
Look, here's the thing. You are not a renewable resource. I am not a renewable resource. If there are 10 people in your prepper group, you have 10 non-renewable resources. So infiltration, no thanks. I'm not sending any of my people to do that unless it's I honestly can't even imagine a scenario where I would need to do that, where at least danger is concerned. The best thing to do is to motivate someone else to do it, someone who might be expendable or maybe a little more expendable than you are, and have them do it. I mean, that's the way a lot of these agencies do that stuff from around the world.
Okay, so maybe
get someone else
you
to
run
do it.
into a dude when you're out foraging or something. He's like, oh, my group this, my group that. And maybe you could get him to jump ship and give you lots of information.
Well, potentially. Yeah, potentially. I mean, there are motivating factors for humans. I mean, there's a handful of them. They're nearly universal. And all you poke and prod, you talk to this individual, find out how this individual might be motivated. And I mean, it's this whole big process. First of all, we have to confirm that this individual has the access or placement that they're claiming to have, right?
Right.
Just because this person says he's in this group does not mean that he or she is in this group. And so we're going down a huge rabbit hole if they don't have the access to the information we're trying to get. Otherwise, we're going to expend valuable resources and time on something that's going to be completely worthless and quite honestly, something that could come back to bite us in the rear end later down the road.
Pretty largely.
Yeah, I mean, recruiting sources, it's not hugely complex. There is a process that generally we can use, and since the stakes are so low right now, now's the time to practice. Just practice eliciting information from people, or getting a friend to go ask another friend some information, something that's low risk but still will allow us to practice some of this stuff. There's tons of resources out there that talk about how to do this, but yeah, in general, I would not send my people to do high risk stuff.
Right. Go on, have fun.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is now think about the information that this individual has. They know all the identities in your group. They know where you live. Yeah. They know where your X, Y, or Z is. And so that's just not someone I want to send into a scenario where that information could be gathered from them and used against me.
Fair enough. Yeah, you leave yourself pretty vulnerable then as well. Yep. Well, that gives us a lot of food for thought. I'm gonna have to look into it a lot more because I'm just really it's a element of the survival group that I hadn't really been focused on at all. So that just gives a lot of food for thought and a lot of direction to develop a system for the MAG group on how you can, know what's around you, what other groups are around you, what kind of refugees are going to be moving through your area, what your risks are and things like that. So it's just a big eye-opener to even, think about all the possibilities, and then actively don't just worry about your survival. You have to be actively gathering that information, like you say, to be a few steps ahead, or else you're dead in the water.
Yes.
Makes a lot of sense.
Very good summary.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, Samuel, thank you so much for coming on and spending your time with us today. I think we got a lot of food for thought and a lot of direction to go here.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for having me, and yeah, I enjoyed it. And
let everybody know one more time where they can find you, how to find Samuel, and get a hold of all the great information that you are providing to us.
Well, I am at forwardobserver.com, like forward. So I have the Southern slang. It's not forward observer. It's forwardobserver.com. And I have a online radio show. It's 4 days a week, just 30 minutes. We just hit the high points. And we're on iTunes and Spotify and some other places. It's just Forward Observer Radio. If you just search that, you will be able to find us.
And it's a great little website. You're doing some awesome work over there. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Samuel, so much for taking the time to come on and share your information with the listeners of the Changing Earth podcast. Really, really appreciate your time, and it was awesome to have connected with you. Remember, if you head on over to Forward Observer, get subscribed up to either the newsletter, and the Area Intelligence Training course is awesome. And you can use the coupon code Sara, S-A-R-A, to get a 10% discount. I have no H, S-A-R-A, 10% discount. So, Samuel, I know you're down in Texas, and I'm headed down to Texas for the Self-Reliance Expo, March 23rd and 24th. And so I hope I can see you there. That would be awesome. So head on over for that. Great show today. We had Chapter 6 from Battle for the South. I love this book because it just clicks. It just keeps clicking along. It's a very exciting book. And then we had Samuel Culper on to talk about military intelligence, which, we only scrape the very top of this conversation, and you could go on and on. Can't wait to have you back next week. Until then, remember, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sara for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, and Battle for the South at www.author.sarafhathaway.com. If you love Sara's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.